What if I told you that the hardest choice isn't between right and wrong, but between two rights? Before I reveal how James made an impossible decision in just 24 hours that changed 3 lives forever, smash that like button and subscribe, because this story about love, sacrifice, and finding your truth will stay with you long after it ends. James Parker stood on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise, watching the city wake up below him. In his left pocket was a plane ticket to London, leaving at noon tomorrow. In his right pocket was an engagement ring he'd bought 3 weeks ago. 24 hours from now, his life would be completely different, but he had no idea which direction it would take. Behind him was Alicia, the woman he'd loved since college, who'd stood by him through his darkest days. Ahead of him was Catherine, the woman who'd reminded him how to dream again, who was waiting for his answer in London. One day, one choice, no going back. Let me tell you how he got here, and maybe you'll understand why some choices break your heart no matter what you decide. James met Alicia when they were both 19 at Columbia University. She was pre-med, driven and brilliant, with dark eyes that missed nothing and a laugh that could light up an entire room. He was studying architecture, a kid from a small town in Ohio who'd never seen a building taller than 5 stories until he moved to New York. They met in the library during finals week, both running on coffee and desperation, and somehow started studying together. Then studying turned into late-night diners, which turned into weekend walks through Central Park, which turned into falling completely in love. Alicia was the first person who believed in James's dreams. When he showed her his sketches of buildings that bent the rules of physics and imagination, she didn't laugh. She looked at them with serious concentration and said, "You're going to change Skyline someday." When his parents called to say they couldn't afford his tuition anymore after his father lost his job, Alicia helped him apply for every scholarship and loan available. When he wanted to give up and move back home, she held his face in her hands and said, "You don't get to quit on yourself. Not on my watch." They graduated together, moved into a tiny apartment in Queens, and started building their lives. Alicia got into her residency program at Mount Sinai. James landed a job at a mid-sized architecture firm. They were broke and exhausted and happier than they'd ever been. They talked about getting married someday, about the house they'd buy upstate, about the kids they'd have once their career stabilized. It was a plan, a future they both believed in. Then James's firm collapsed during the recession. Overnight, he went from designing buildings to sending out hundreds of resumes that went nowhere. Architecture jobs vanished. For 8 months, he worked retail, waited tables, did anything to pay his share of the rent, while Alicia worked 80-hour weeks at the hospital. The rejection letters piled up. His confidence crumbled. He started drinking more than he should, sleeping less than he needed, and pushing away the one person who was trying to help him. Alicia was patient at first. She'd come home after 30-hour shifts and find James on the couch, another rejection letter crumpled beside him, and she'd sit down and tell him it would get better. But patience has limits, and exhaustion makes everyone brittle. They started fighting about money, about his job search, about whether he was trying hard enough. The fights got uglier. Words were said that couldn't be taken back. The night everything fell apart, James had bombed an interview for a job he was overqualified for. He came home and found Alicia crying at the kitchen table, still in her scrubs, a letter in her hands. Her student loans had gone into repayment, and the monthly payment was more than their rent. They couldn't afford it. They could barely afford food. "I can't do this anymore," she said, and James's heart stopped. "I can't work these hours and come home and be strong enough for both of us. I love you, James, but I'm drowning and you're not even trying to swim." "I'm trying," he said, but even he could hear how hollow it sounded. "Are you?" Alicia looked at him with eyes full of disappointment that hurt worse than anger. "Because from where I'm sitting, you've given up. You've decided you're a failure, and now you're just waiting for the world to prove you right." They broke up that night, not because they stopped loving each other, but because they were both drowning and didn't know how to save themselves, let alone each other. James moved out the next week. Alicia threw herself into her work. They didn't speak for 3 years. During those 3 years, James slowly rebuilt himself. He took a job doing technical drawings for a construction company. It wasn't designing buildings, but it was architecture adjacent, and it paid the bills. He stopped drinking. He started therapy. He worked on the portfolio he'd abandoned and began entering design competitions. And slowly, impossibly, he started to believe in himself again. That's when he met Catherine. She was British, in New York for a year working at an architecture magazine, and she walked into James's office to interview his boss about a project. James ended up giving her the tour, because his boss was in meetings. Catherine asked smart questions, understood the technical aspects, and saw the artistry in the structural work most people overlooked. When the interview ended, she looked at James and said, "You're wasted doing technical drawings. Who's seen your actual designs?" "Nobody important," James admitted. "Show me," she said, so he did. He took her to a coffee shop and pulled out his portfolio with shaking hands, showing her the designs he'd created in his spare time. Catherine studied each one carefully, and when she looked up, there was excitement in her green eyes. "These are extraordinary. You should be designing buildings, not drafting someone else's." "I tried that," James said. "It didn't work out." "So try again," Catherine said simply, "but try differently." Catherine became his champion. She wrote an article about emerging architects and featured James's work. She introduced him to people at firms he'd never have access to otherwise. She pushed him to enter a major international competition, and when he hesitated, she said, "What's the worst that happens? You don't win? You're already not winning by not entering." He entered, and he won. Suddenly, James Parker was a name people knew. Firms wanted to hire him. He had choices for the first time in years. And through it all, Catherine was there, celebrating his victories, pushing him through his doubts, making him believe he was capable of everything he'd once dreamed of. They fell in love the way people do when someone sees your potential and reflects it back to you until you can finally see it yourself. Catherine made him feel like he could conquer the world. With her, everything felt possible. She was spontaneous where Alicia had been practical, adventurous where Alicia had been cautious. Catherine suggested weekend trips to Boston to see buildings, midnight walks through the city sketching architecture, days spent in museums analyzing design. With Catherine, James felt like the man he'd always wanted to be. After a year, Catherine's work visa expired. She had to return to London, but she asked James to come with her. "There's a firm there that wants to interview you," she said. "They loved your competition, design. This could be your big break, James. Come to London. Build your career. Build our life." James was on the verge of saying yes when Alicia called. He almost didn't answer. 3 years of silence, and suddenly her name on his screen. But something made him pick up. "James," she said, and her voice cracked. "I know I have no right to call you, but I need to see you, please." They met at their old diner, the one where they'd had their first date a lifetime ago. Alicia looked different, older, more tired, but somehow more herself than she'd been during those final difficult months. She ordered coffee and then just looked at him for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she finally said, "for how things ended, for making you feel like you weren't enough. You were always enough, James. I was just so tired and scared that I couldn't see it." "Why are you telling me this now?" James asked carefully. "Because I finished my residency," Alicia said, "and I was sitting in my apartment, finally done with the thing that consumed my entire life for 7 years, and all I could think about was you. About how I pushed away the best thing that ever happened to me because I was too exhausted to fight for us." She reached across the table and took his hand. "I know you've probably moved on. I know it's not fair to show up after 3 years and say this, but I never stopped loving you, James. And I needed you to know that." James felt like he'd been hit by a truck. "Alicia, I don't know what to say. Say you'll think about giving us another chance," she said. "Say we can try again, but this time as people who've grown, who've learned from their mistakes. I'm not the same person who let you go, and I don't think you're the same person who left." James thought about Catherine waiting for his answer in London, about the life they could build together, the career opportunity, the fresh start. Then he thought about Alicia, about the years they'd shared, about how she'd believed in him before he believed in himself. "I need time," he said. "This is complicated." "How complicated?" Alicia asked, and he saw understanding dawn in her eyes. "There's someone else." James nodded. "Her name is Catherine. She's in London. She wants me to come with her. And I was going to say yes until you called." Alicia pulled her hand back. "Do you love her?" "Yes," James admitted. "But I also never stopped loving you. I don't know how that's possible, but it's true. They talked for hours. About the 3 years apart, about what they'd learned, about the people they'd become. Alicia told him about the patients she'd saved and the ones she couldn't. About learning to ask for help instead of carrying everything alone. About going to therapy and finally processing her father's death that had happened right before they broke up. Grief she'd never dealt with because she was too busy trying to be strong. James told her about Catherine, about winning the competition, about finally believing he was good enough. And as he talked, he saw something in Alicia's face. Pride mixed with sadness, happiness for him tangled with regret for what they'd lost. When they finally left the diner, Alicia said, "I meant what I said. I want another chance. But I also want you to be happy, James. If that's with Catherine in London, then I'll survive. I did it once. But if there's any part of you that wants to try again with us, I'm here. I'm not going anywhere this time." James went home to his apartment and stared at the ceiling all night. Catherine called, excited about the job opportunity, talking about apartments they could look at in London, about starting their adventure. Every word she said made James smile, made him excited for a future that felt full of possibility. But when he closed his eyes, he saw Alicia, the girl who'd believed in him first, the woman who knew his worst moments and his greatest fears, the person who'd seen him at rock bottom and loved him anyway, even if she'd been too exhausted to show it at the time. The next morning, James made a decision. He called his best friend Marcus, told him everything, and asked for advice. "Man, that's brutal," Marcus said, "but here's the question. Who do you choose if neither of them existed? If you strip away the guilt about Alicia and the excitement about Catherine, who's the person you want to be with?" James didn't have an answer. That's when Marcus said something that changed everything. "You have a choice to make, and you need to make it fast because keeping both of them waiting isn't fair. So here's what you do. Give yourself 24 hours. Really think about what you want. Then choose, commit completely, and don't look back." James called both women and told them the truth. He told Catherine about Alicia's return and his confusion. He told Alicia about Catherine and the London opportunity. Both women were hurt, but both appreciated his honesty. 24 hours, James said. "That's all I'm asking for. Tomorrow at this time I'll have an answer." Catherine said, "My flight to London is tomorrow afternoon. If you choose us, be at JFK at noon. I'll wait until boarding, but after that, I'm getting on that plane with or without you." Alicia said, "I'll be at our bench in Central Park tomorrow at sunset. If you choose us, meet me there. If you don't come, I'll understand." And that's how James found himself on the Brooklyn Bridge at sunrise with 24 hours to make an impossible choice. He spent the day walking through the city, visiting all the places that meant something. The library where he and Alicia had met, the coffee shop where Catherine had first looked at his designs, the apartment in Queens where he and Alicia had been so happy and then so miserable, the magazine office where Catherine worked. He made a list of pros and cons, then threw it away because you can't logic your way through love. He called his mom, who said, "Follow your heart, honey." He called his therapist, who said, "What do you really want, James? Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want?" As the hours ticked away, James realized something. He'd been thinking about this all wrong. The question wasn't who he loved more. He loved them both. The question was who he was and who he wanted to become. With Alicia came history, deep, understanding, and the comfort of someone who'd known him before he became successful. But also the ghosts of their painful past, the memory of how they'd failed each other when times got hard. With Catherine came adventure, possibility, and a fresh start unencumbered by old wounds. But also the fear that maybe what he loved wasn't Catherine herself, but the version of himself she reflected back to him. At 11 a.m., James made his choice. He grabbed the engagement ring from his pocket, took one last look at the city he loved, and headed to JFK Airport. His hands shook as he walked through the terminal, scanning the crowds for Catherine's familiar red hair. When he saw her sitting by the gate, her face lit up with hope and relief. "You came," she said, standing up. "I came to tell you the truth," James said gently. "Catherine, you saved me. You made me believe in myself again when I'd forgotten how. You showed me what I was capable of, and I'll never forget that. You're extraordinary, and being with you has been incredible." Catherine's face fell as she heard the "but" coming. "But I'm not getting on that plane." James continued. I love you, Catherine. I really do. But I think I fell in love with the life you represented, the success, the adventure, the fresh start. And you deserve someone who loves you for you, not for what you make them feel about themselves. Tears streamed down Catherine's face. It's Alicia, isn't it? It is, James admitted. She's my home. We failed each other once, but we were different people then. I need to know if we can make it work as the people we've become, and I can't do that if I'm running away to London. Catherine wiped her tears and managed a sad smile. I hate that this is your choice, but I respect it. And James, I hope you two make it. I really do. They hugged goodbye, and James watched her board the plane that would take her back to London without him. His heart ached, but he felt certainty settling into his bones. He made to Central Park, just as the sun was setting. Alicia sat on their bench, wearing the same blue jacket she'd worn on their first date. When she saw him, she stood up, her expression somewhere between hope and terror. I choose us, James said, closing the distance between them. I choose the history we share and the future we could have. I choose trying again and doing it better this time. I choose you, Alicia, if you'll have me. Alicia launched herself into his arms, and they held each other as the sun set over the city they both loved. We're going to have to work at this, she said into his chest. Really work. Therapy, honest conversations, building new patterns. I know, James said. And I'm ready. Are you? I am, Alicia said. I really am. 6 months later, James proposed properly with the ring he'd bought before his world turned upside down. They got married in a small ceremony with just their closest friends. James took a job at a New York firm, turning down the London opportunity, but finding fulfillment in building his career in the city he loved. Alicia finished her fellowship and started working at a clinic that gave her better hours and better balance. It wasn't perfect. They had hard days, old arguments that resurfaced, moments of doubt, but they showed up for each other. They went to therapy together. They learned to communicate better, to ask for help, to support each other without losing themselves. Years later, when their daughter asked how they knew they were meant to be together, James said, "We didn't. We chose each other, and then we worked every day to become the people who could make that choice worth it." The truth about love that James learned is this. Sometimes you can love two people, but love isn't just a feeling, it's a decision. It's choosing someone and then honoring that choice through action. He'd loved Catherine and letting her go hurt, but he'd chosen Alicia, and every day since he'd chosen to make that choice mean something. If this story touched you, hit that like button and subscribe. Share it with someone who needs to hear that the right choice isn't always the easy one, but it's the one you can commit to fully. Because real love isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone worth choosing, and then choosing them again every single day.